Back live with you tonight here on In Focus. Let's take you now to the presidential gala dinner of the ANC happening at Newzroom. Now, speaking earlier on, President Cyril Ramaphosa says the presidential gala dinner is a precursor to a great conference set to start tomorrow. Ramaphosa has hailed members of the ANC Business Forum as true friends of the ANC and its progressive policy developments. For the latest on that story, let's cross live now to Ziyanda Ngcobo, our senior reporter in politics, live there for us. How has the evening been going, Ziyanda? Certainly a sold-out house. I suppose that's exactly what the ANC would have loved to see.
It's certainly what the ANC would have loved to see, but it's certainly what the ANC actually needs right now in terms of its financial situation. It will be very interesting what the financial report will actually indicate about the last 5 years, in particular in the last year or so, regarding the financial status of the organization. But, you know, Thabo, the president, as you've mentioned, saying that tomorrow is a precursor for a very important conference. In fact, I think the biggest takeaway there is him saying that it's a watershed conference which will not only determine the future of the ANC for the next 5 years, but the next decade. A big indication there from President Cyril Ramaphosa of the importance and the weight that is, lying behind this conference. Let's listen to what he had to say about the conduct of cadres and their importance when it comes to the governance of this country.
Only an ANC that is comprised of loyal cadres who are selfless, whose only desire is to serve the cause of the people of South Africa, can ensure that the public service that we give to our people reflects the values that the ANC stands for.
So, Thabo, you also would have heard the president there speaking about the kind of ANC member who needs to be able to build the country, but also Ramaphosa speaking about that precursor that we've been discussing to an important conference. But I must say, in terms of, the mood, you can tell, a lot of NEC members who previously in previous years would have usually been a part of this are not yet. It seems there's a lot of individual jostling and caucus meetings behind the scenes. And also in terms of, the registration that's taking place with the delegates. So a watershed moment, but also let's listen to what the president had to say then about how he anticipates everything to unfold over the next couple of days.
And I see this as a wonderful precursor to what will definitely become a wonderful conference that commences tomorrow. So I'd like to thank you for being here, particularly those who are also members of the Progressive Business Forum and those who are friends of the African National Congress. Your presence here speaks volumes about the high regard you have for the African National Congress, and it tells us that you continue to be interested, to be supportive of the work that we do in the African National Congress, and more broadly as the leader of the government of the Republic of South Africa.
As President Cyril Ramaphosa, they are addressing that gathering there of business earlier on. Now, Ziyanda, it's President Cyril Ramaphosa who's been under intense pressure, one would say, in the last couple of days, seeing that culminating on Tuesday with some senior ANC members voting for the adoption of an independent panel report that could have seen him facing an impeachment committee. Is the ANC wanting to talk about that tonight? What's the mood from the likes of Paul Mashatile, Gwedemantashe, who have said those particular members would need to face some disciplinary action?
I tell you what, the Section 89 panel report did not even become a feature at this evening's gathering. In fact, it was more about the international dignitaries who graced this event. But, you know, a haggard and tired-looking President Cyril Ramaphosa on stage, really talking about things that we've heard before, whether it's the country's response to the vaccines, whether it's about the triple challenges of poverty and inequality and unemployment. And I suppose that's because there's a lot that's been happening behind the scenes, Thabo, when it comes to positions. You know, one of the key things that I think all factions agree on is that there's no one in no position that is safe at this particular stage. We may be reading too much into the late start to this gathering. Even how long the president's speech was, I think, give or take, it was about 20 to 30 minutes maximum. And I think it's because a lot of the work now is being focused towards the start of the conference, where the real issues will be dealt with. Whether you're talking about, the disciplinary action that's being brought against the five MPs, well, there's an anticipation that it won't just be Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. It seems, I've spoken to one of the senior leaders who was here today. They said that it's likely to be pushed onto the new NEC that will be elected. You'll know that the Integrity Commission, when it comes to the Phala Phala report, as well as Digital Vibes reports, will form part of the organizational report, which means then that the delegates of this conference will be able to, they will be tasked rather with discussing then what should happen to these candidates. So there are so many issues that are bubbling under in the precursor to this conference that are also integrally linked to the outcomes of the conference and who gets elected to which position. So yes, you saw a Chinese dignitary there. The Russian ambassador was here as well. But it would seem that even in terms of the mood in the room, there wasn't a lot of focus then on the engagements, the international policy. Granted, the president mentioned the Russia-Ukraine conference, but nothing really tangible for those who may not be au fait with the nitty-gritties of the internal machinations of the ANC.
Speaking of the internal machinations of the ANC, the President making sure to note that former President Jacob Zuma had indicated that he would be attending this event. Former President Kgalema Motlanthe and other senior dignitaries, the Deputy President having sent his apology. What is the expectation? Is former President Zuma going to be at the conference?
From what we understand, that the former president has every intention to be a part of the conference, but everything and anything could happen at this particular point in time. And this is exactly the kind of angst and back and forth and uncertainty that underlies the mood of this conference. Nobody knows, you know. Unlike in 2017, at this very venue, for an example, there was a level of confidence and certainty, especially from the faction backing Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, that they would win. There was a bit more order and organization in terms of where everybody was, which province was going in which direction. Whereas here, it seems to be various bits of factions that are trying to be consolidated at the very last minute that continue to change. So, for an example, yesterday at the ANC Gauteng Provincial General Council, it seems that they were backing Dr. Zweli Mkhize to become, president of the organization. And you'll know that Gauteng, at their provincial conference, there was a faction supporting Panyazali Sofi and the Adiwele faction. So it's 50-50 here and there, it's 30% there, 20% there, and this is exactly why there seems to just be this angst, and this why, one or two senior leaders said that nobody is safe at this particular point in time. So it's difficult to call, and a lot of negotiations are taking place right now, and it seems that this conference will be determined up until the very last hour.
Talk about the gala dinner itself. I mean, I know you've attended a couple of these. For lack of a better word, the razzmatazz that normally comes with this kind of event seems to be quite lacking there today. Even the energy of the guests not in the level at peak where we would normally see it at this event.
Absolutely spot on, Thabo. Like I mentioned, even in terms of the presence of NEC members, and it's because of the disorder behind the scenes. There's really just no other way of putting it. There was no state of readiness briefing today, Thabo, which is par for the course before our conference. There was a lack of communication, for example, to media colleagues about where things are and how things would happen. And perhaps this is symptomatic of the fact that the Secretary General's office has been really weakened, one with the suspension of Ace Magashule and the passing away of Deputy Secretary General Jesse Duarte. Everything doesn't seem to be as it should be. The razzmatazz, as you say, I'm told that some international dignitaries until at this moment, as we speak right now, have not even been accredited for the conference. A lot of the diplomatic corps, in fact, that I've spoken to, also don't know whether or not they'll have access to this conference. Added to this, it's the high levels of securitization at this conference. You're literally escorted from point A to B, almost literally being escorted to the toilet, might I add. And this is just symptomatic of the energy and the environment that this conference is taking place under. So it's no wonder then that President Cyril Ramaphosa is defining this as a watershed gathering.
So, I mean, looking at that securitization, do you get a sense that there's an expectation, if we read that tweet that was purported to have come from the handle of Umambatabile Dlamini, that there will be a festival of chairs? Is the ANC anticipating that and therefore almost preparing itself to be able to respond to that?
Look, I think every ANC conference is an increasing level of securitization. I can't quite pinpoint what is leading to that, but yes, there is a lot of angst. That I can confirm for you for sure regarding the start and the end of this conference. In fact, that's why it would seem that there's a proposal, and it's been a divisive point, but there's a proposal to split the voting, just simply because you'll remember that there's a constitutional amendment proposal to have 2 deputy secretary generals. So now there's a proposal to have voting split into 2. Voting to take place for the positions of president, chair, secretary general, and treasurer general, and that take place in one lot, and then there's an announcement, and then a second round of voting then for the positions of deputy secretary general and deputy president. And of course, if the delegates then vote to get a second deputy secretary general, then it will be a vote for the 2 DSGs and that of the deputy president. That has also been a divisive point. Some saying that why should there be a separation? They should be voting in one go. But that tells you the level of anxiety and rush, because they at least want to get through the positions, that especially that of president and secretary general, before continuing with the constitutional amendments. Because it's not just a constitutional amendment for DSG. There's also the issue of the amendment of the step-aside guidelines, which have been a subject of debate for the organization over the last couple of months. So that also gives you an indication of what the priorities are for the organization at this stage.
So, final one, Ziyanda, I'm going to let you go. The president in that address mentioning that, of course, this is the conference where the policies that were discussed in the previous policy conference would now be adopted. Now, you and I have, in the past 10 or so minutes, just been talking about the elections and who would be voted in. Is there an appetite? Is there an argument? Are there debates around policies? I know by this time, 5 years ago, it was whether or not it's radical economic transformation or it is inclusive growth, whether it's white monopoly capital or it's just monopoly capital. Those were the kind of policy talks that were expected to be decided at this conference. Is there such a discussion currently going on?
Not at all. Not from the people I've spoken to, the leaders I've spoken to, the delegates I've spoken to. That doesn't seem to be top of mind. You'll even remember that in 2017, the issue of land and the amendment of Section 25 and the establishment of a state bank, which, by the way, already exists in the form of Itala Bank. Those were the key policy debates. But I think President Cyril Ramaphosa acknowledges to a large degree the fact that he's been criticized for not implementing the 54th National Conference resolutions. And in fact, we even need to correct ourselves by calling this an elective conference, because it's not just an elective conference. It's the 55th National Conference. It's discussing policy in and amongst then the election of a new leadership. So you elect this new leadership to implement what exactly? What capacity do they have to implement these? And where's the discussion of through the eye of the needle, which was something that was very topical, and not even just in the last Nasrec conference, but even as far back as Mangaung. Again, the issue of the ANC being inward looking is a discussion that is still continuing. And South Africans, I would presume, will be watching the kinds and the level of debate that will be coming out of this national conference.
Ziyanda, appreciate your time. Thanks so much. Live for us there in Nasrec. That is where things are beginning to wrap up there in that presidential gala dinner.